15 Golden Age starlets who married the ugliest husbands. Hollywood's Golden Age gave us some of the most stunning women ever to grace the silver screen. Luminous beauties whose faces launched 1,000 magazines and whose glamour defined an era. These goddesses of cinema could have had any man they wanted, which makes their actual choices all the more baffling. Behind the carefully crafted publicity photos and studio-arranged romances, these screen sirens made matrimonial decisions that left fans scratching their heads and gossip columnists struggling to explain the inexplicable. While these actresses captivated audiences with their beauty, talent, and charisma, they often went home to husbands who, to put it kindly, wouldn't have made the cut as leading men in their own right. Today, we're exploring one of Hollywood's most perplexing phenomena, the stunning starlets who said, "I do." Two men who made audiences ask, why him? Some of these marriages were brief disasters, others surprisingly enduring. Some were cynical business arrangements, others genuine love matches. But all of them featured a dramatic imbalance in the looks, department that left the public wondering what these screen goddesses saw in their decidedly unglamorous partners. Was it rebellion against studio control? A desperate search for intellectual stimulation, or simply proof that beauty isn't everything even in Hollywood? Let's find out as we count down 15 Golden Age starlets who married the ugliest husbands in Tinseltown history. Ava and I would like to thank everybody for their many good wishes, and especially our boss, Mr. Louis B. Mayer, one Ava Gardner and Mickey Rooney. When 19-year-old Ava Gardner married Mickey Rooney in 1942, created one of Hollywood's most visually jarring couples. Gardner was just beginning her ascent to becoming one of cinema's great beauties, a raven-haired vision whose exotic allure would soon make her the epitome of the femme fatale. Rooney, on the other hand, was, well, Mickey Rooney. She was a goddess. He was a gremlin with a studio contract, standing just 5'2" in with a boyish face that never quite matured into conventional handsomeness. Rooney was Hollywood's #1 box office draw at the time, but certainly not for his looks. The contrast between the statuesque Gardner and the dominion of Rooney was so pronounced that it became the talk of Hollywood. When they walked into a room together, people actually gasped, recalled one MGM publicist. It was like watching Beauty and the Leprechaun. You couldn't help but wonder what she saw in him. What Gardner saw initially was star power. As a young contract player trying to build her career, marriage to Hollywood's biggest star offered professional advantages. What she quickly discovered, however, was that Rooney's ego far exceeded his physical stature, particularly when it came to his notorious womanizing. Mickey was the most oversexed man I've ever known. Gardner later wrote in her autobiography, "I was just a kid and didn't know he was a serial cheater. He'd leave me sitting at home while he was out screwing everything that moved." The marriage lasted just 16 months before Gardner filed for divorce, citing mental cruelty. Rooney would go on to marry 7 more times, while Gardner eventually wed Frank Sinatra after a tumultuous marriage to band leader Artie Shaw. "I was a naive country girl who didn't know the ways of Hollywood men." Gardner later reflected Mickey may have been a big star, but he was an even bigger disappointment. Despite her subsequent marriages to more conventionally handsome men, Gardner's brief union with Rooney remains one of Hollywood's most visually incongruous pairings, a mismatch that launched countless jokes and left fans wondering how America's #1 box office draw had managed to win the hand of one of cinema's greatest beauties. I'm fully confident that in the end, my husband will win this case. 2. Marilyn Monroe and Arthur Miller. When America's most famous sex symbol married one of its most celebrated intellectuals in 1956, the headlines practically wrote themselves. Egad marries Hourglass. Beauty in the brains, the genius, and the goddess. She married a brain. But Hollywood couldn't believe the face that came with it. Marilyn Monroe, at the height of her fame and beauty, shocked the public by choosing Arthur Miller, a balding, bespectacled playwright, nearly 11 years her senior, as her third husband. After marriages to working-class boy James Dougherty and sports icon Joe Diageo, Monroe's selection of the decidedly unglamorous Miller left many questioning her judgment. The reaction in Hollywood was disbelief, notes film historian Margaret Johnson. Monroe was the ultimate blonde bombshell desired by millions, and she chose a serious intellectual who looked like an accountant. People couldn't reconcile the image of the sex goddess with the reality of her. Marrying someone who looked like everyone's high school English teacher? Monroe herself was well aware of the public perception. "I hate to say this, but I don't think people want to see me married to an intellectual," she confided to a friend. That isn't the image. The image is a girl standing over a subway grating with her dress blowing up for Monroe. However, Miller represented something she desperately craved: intellectual validation. Having spent her career being valued primarily for her body, Miller's appreciation of her mind and spirit offered a respect she hadn't found with more conventionally attractive men. Arthur was different. Monroe's acting coach, Paula Strasberg, later recalled, "He saw past the blonde hair and the figure. He saw Marilyn's vulnerability, her intelligence, her desire to be taken seriously for a woman who'd spent her life being treated as a beautiful object that was intoxicating." Unfortunately, the marriage that began with such promise ended in heartbreak. Miller, who had initially seemed to cherish Monroe's complexity, grew increasingly frustrated with her insecurities and dependencies. After writing a thinly veiled and unflattering portrayal of her in his screenplay for The Misfits, Monroe felt betrayed by the man she had trusted to see her true self. "I thought he would understand and protect me," Monroe reportedly told her MSR shortly before their 1961 divorce. "Instead, he put all my neurosis on the screen for everyone to see." Their 5-year marriage, though ultimately unsuccessful, remains one of Hollywood's most fascinating studies in contrasts: physical, intellectual, and temperamental. It also represents a poignant chapter in Monroe's quest to be valued for more than her beauty, even if that meant choosing a partner whose looks were the antithesis of Hollywood's glamorous ideal. "I don't like that." "No, but tell me more." "I never lived that way." "Isn't that what it's all about?" "No." 3. Hedy Lamarr and Jean Markey. In the pantheon of Hollywood beauty, few stars shone as brightly as Hedy Lamarr. With her perfect symmetrical features, luminous dark eyes, and alabaster skin, Lamarr was widely considered the most beautiful woman in the world. During her heyday in the 1940s, her exquisite looks were so remarkable that they sometimes overshadowed both her considerable acting talent and her brilliant mind. She was an inventor who developed a frequency hopping signal that became a precursor to modern WFI technology. Given her extraordinary beauty, fans were particularly puzzled by her 1939 marriage to Jean Markey, a screenwriter and producer whose physical appearance could charitably be described as distinctive. She was called the most beautiful woman alive and still said yes to that chin. Markey, who was 18 years Lamarr's senior, sported an unusually weak chin, a receding hairline, and a generally soft, doughy appearance that stood in stark contrast to Lamarr's flawless features. Hollywood wags joked that Markey looked more like Lamarr's accountant than her husband. "Daddy could have had any man in Hollywood, probably in the world," noted one contemporary columnist. Why she chose Jean Markey was a mystery that kept the gossip columnists busy for months. The answer may have lain in Markey's intellectual and social connections. A Yale-educated writer who moved in sophisticated circles, Markey offered Lamarr, an Austrian immigrant still finding her footing in America, entree into a world of culture and refinement. Jean was highly intelligent and extremely well-connected, explains film historian Robert Thompson. For Hedy, who was brilliant herself, but often underestimated due to her beauty, Markey's intellectual credentials and social standing were attractive qualities that transcended physical appearance. The marriage, however, was short-lived. Lasting barely a year before ending in divorce in 1941, Lamarr would go on to marry 5 more times, suggesting that finding lasting romantic happiness proved more elusive than success in Hollywood or scientific innovation. Interestingly, Markey himself had quite a track record with beautiful actresses despite his unremarkable looks. Before Lamarr, he had been married to actress Joan Bennett, and after their divorce, he would go on to wed Maui, proving that in Hollywood, power and connections could often compensate for a less-than-perfect face. A weigh-in butt that was so small. But Joan, let me interfere for one moment. For Lana Turner and Lex Barker. Unlike many entries on our list, Lana Turner's 4th husband, Lex Barker, wasn't physically unattractive in the conventional sense. Best known for playing Tarzan in 5 films during the late 1940s and early 1950s, the 6'4" Burker possessed the chiseled features and impressive physique that had made him believable as Edgar Rice Burroughs' jungle hero. But physical appearance can mask a much uglier reality. As Turner would discover in one of Hollywood's most disturbing marriages, good cheekbones couldn't cover what was rotten underneath. Turner, the glamorous blonde whose discovery a